Hi, everybody. It's exactly 1 o'clock according to the wonderful people at StreamYard. Hi, Linda, Debbie Joyce. Angela, go back to bed. If you're sick, don't try to stay up. Besides, it's the end of the afternoon for you anyway. Um, and Jen's telling us how lovely it is in California and Arizona.
I see. I turned it on.
Okay.
Hola.
Anyway, as you can see, Jeffrey's here. And as you know, I always start the day out with a thought. And it says, make up your mind that nothing is more important than how I feel now.
Hmm.
Because now is everything. Now is the whole enchilada. Now is the power of me. Now. You may as well start somewhere, and it should be now.
See.
Why not start improving your life right now? And because this is, Jeffrey and I have discussed this, and we're both getting the same question, and I've talked to a lot of other readers, and they're getting the same question. People are calling them up and saying, read and tell me what my talent is. Read and tell me
Hmm.
what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm going to tell you, if you've ever heard me, for the most part, I deflect that question because I believe you have to find that.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey and I are going to talk about um, different paths we know that we've seen people go down. I'm going to, in particular, talk about my path. I'm not sure altogether what Jeffrey's going to talk about because he lives in Mexico City, and we had about 10 minutes to talk before the show.
I'm going to do the whole thing in Spanish.
He's going to do the whole thing in Spanish, and then we're all going to be lost. So,
It's funny because I get a little message every day too, and
uh-huh.
I used to do it on YouTube, but I'm taking a little break from that. And my the little message I got today was, allow yourself to make a mistake. You
Uh-huh.
know, try something. It's like doesn't work. It doesn't work. But somebody's like, oh, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's like just try it.
Yeah, do it.
That was my little message of the day. It's like, see what happens.
Uh-huh. And people say, how did you figure out all the things you can do? Well, this is my path, and you're going to get my whole life history, but I've tried to spin it down into 2 minutes. Anyway, I kind of, when I look back now at the age I am and I look back at my life, I realize I was always tuned in at a very, very early age, but I wasn't running around telling everybody I was tuned in. As a matter of fact, most of the time I was misunderstood. My mother used to say I was lying, I was making things up, but they were things I was really seeing. And I started playing with tarot cards when I was like between 10 and 12 years old, and it was at slumber parties. Everybody had a deck of cards, and everybody sort of passed them around and try to read them for each other. And we found out that when I read the cards, they made sense. And so I tended to hang in there reading cards and hanging with it and understanding there was more to this world. I read a lot of Hans Holzer, who was a ghost hunter, the original one in the 50s. And I read a lot of his books, and all that stuff fascinated me. And I kept looking around, I kept reading. Then I don't know how many of you, this is an old movie because I was 13, I think, when I saw it. It was called The Haunting of Hill House, and it's about a Victorian mansion, and this psychic guy gathers a bunch of people together to go figure out what's going on in the house. Anyway, it's a very scary movie, and it was extremely scary to me because while I was watching it, I realized I'd done everything that was in that movie. I'd seen ghosts. I knew how this energy moved. I mean, it was very visceral for me. And I mean, they did a good job of making the movie, but at the very end, when the woman is going to be, they're making her leave the house because they think the house wants to own her or subsume her. At the very last scene, I ended up running out of the theater and leaving my very best friend Bucky sitting there in the theater. She was so scared she couldn't move, and she was like, when she got out and met me in the lobby, she said, "What the hell's wrong with you? You dragged me to this movie, and then you run out in the last 5 minutes." And I said, "The woman died, didn't she?" And she said, "Yeah." And she said, "It didn't help me to be sitting there alone." So then I I just kept seeing a lot of stuff and hearing a lot of stuff and being around a lot of things. And I kept reading and looking around. Um, at that point, I started doing some remote viewing, which is probably one of the reasons why I don't like it when people just said, oh, go remote view. Remote viewing is very intrusive and it can be very disorienting for you. And if you're going to do remote viewing, really read up on it, figure out how to guard yourself. Because that was the other thing, is I didn't have anybody teaching me how to protect myself, except what I could remember from my old ways. And every once in a while, I would channel in something and I'd say, oh, that sounds good. So one of the things I did was, being a teenage girl, I would want to get people to call me. So I'd get a blank piece of paper, I'd write my phone number and their phone number, and I'd say, call me. And I'd roll it up and I'd burn it. I don't know why I thought burning it was such a great idea. And I definitely would get called by those people, but it was usually after they'd been hurt or injured, or they'd fallen down the stairs, or there's something else that happened to them. So I finally figured out, oh, that's not really helping matters. So I need to learn how to protect myself. And then when I was in college, I used remote viewing to view a roommate's house. And I was telling her, and I described her bedroom. She said, well, you could probably figure that from being in here with my stuff, knowing what colors I like and blah, blah, blah. And then I was telling her about the beautiful picture of her mother that was hanging over the fireplace in their living room. And she said, oh, now I've got you. She said, there's no picture of my mother over the fireplace. And I said, well, I see her, and she's in this long blue dress and for some real special occasion, and it looks really cool. And she went home at Thanksgiving, back to Memphis. And apparently, while she was gone, her parents had hung this beautiful portrait, this oil portrait they'd had done of her mother when she'd been chairman of some charity ball and was in this long blue dress. That roommate showed up and immediately asked to be removed from being in a room with me. That's what I learned. Don't do this stuff. It's not. They may think it's cool, but they really don't. And that, as an adult, I read cards occasionally for friends. I eventually got talked into working some psychic fairs, and that was fun. And I formally studied for a year, astrology, enough to learn that I understand it's really valid. I don't want to do it. And through astrology, I learned numerology, and I learned all the other adjunct sciences and things that go along with it. But quite honestly, if you're trying to make a breakthrough for yourself and you can't calm yourself down enough to meditate, which is also one of those problems I've had in my life, I started doing EFT, which is, that's tapping. It's known as tapping. And I just saw it one day and thought, well, I found a really inexpensive course. And I don't work for these people, but Daily Om has a really inexpensive but very extensive 30-lesson course in tapping. And that opened that whole world up to me, and it opened up a whole lot of other worlds. And people say, how did you end up, if you were a tarot reader, how did you end up working with grids and stones? Well, it fell that at my table, I would give away stones to people when I read them, especially fluorites. And people would come back to me and they'd go, I'd almost forgotten what you said to me. And then I was digging around my purse and I found that little stone you gave me, which was usually a fluorite. And they said, and like the next day, what you had told me was going to happen. It's like, I believe that stones carry messages, they record things, and they hold it for us. So,
like water.
Right, like water does. So and that kind of grew into, I began to see that I could create answers for people by laying the stones out in a grid. And it just kind of grew. So, and then eventually I ended up creating the garden, which is throwing stones into certain specific spaces. If you've never seen one of my acrylic eggs, but I have two. One's for the throat and one's for the heart. And you can concentrate on them. And when I made a bunch of those 3 years ago, I had people who told me they viewed them as portals, that they could move through. I didn't create them to be that. I just knew how to make them. And then, of course, I make grids, and you must never have watched my channel if you can see, but this is my grid for the world.
Yeah, mine is. Can you see it? There.
Mhm. Yeah, they're hanging on your wall behind you.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of, so I just keep my mind open, and when I see something, I get interested. And of course, I believe all of this is wrapped up with vibrations, which is why I study energies and why I follow energies, waves of energy that's coming from outer space. And we are now at a point where we're all becoming something different.
Yeah.
And, or we're becoming more of who we really are.
Right.
And the thing at the bottom of our screen says, somewhere in the world, a tree sprouted today that will grow. And maybe that tree is spiritually, it'll sprout within you. And that's kind of when people say, how do you find what you're supposed to do? You just do it.
Yeah. Follow the butterflies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now, Jeffrey.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that like my little message and your little message kind of combine.
Mm-hmm.
Like allow yourself to make a mistake, because sometimes it's like I have an inkling or an idea about something I want to do or try, and then I talk myself out of it before anything comes to fruition. And the thing is, it's like, so you made a mistake. You figured out that it was good for you or not good for you, or I'm more interested in this, and maybe I'll call somebody, or maybe I'll watch something, or did you know anything about this? Hey, do you know anything about this? My journey has really been more for me, like really about owning being an empath.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I mean, I knew exactly what was going on with everyone around me.
Mm-hmm.
Small child, which was really quite overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that because of that, I think like the gifts that I received were ones that I needed in order to help me navigate through the world if I'm picking up everyone else's feelings. And I don't really know when I started reading tarot. I think I was kind of in my early 20s, around then.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely opened me up to plugging in and trusting my own intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason, so Nancy and I, give a class, and I know a lot about the symbolism and the iconography. And many years ago, and this was an example of my following butterflies, right?
Right.
I had a roommate I was obsessed with, right? And I quit smoking to make him happy. Whatever. You know how that went. But I realized that if I didn't do something with my physical body, I was so out of my mind. I had so much energy. I was crazy. And I had gone to fashion school, and I started buying I Love New York t-shirts, and I started dyeing them. I don't even know how this all happened. It just sort of happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned into a whole business. So I started with the I Love New York, but then I was like, well, what do you really want to make? And I was always interested in spiritual topics and things like that. So I started doing all this research on spiritual emblems and symbols and etc. And then I really went deep, and then I really learned a lot about ancient cultures and about symbols and about like what does a pine cone actually symbolize? What does an eagle actually symbolize? Blah, blah, blah. And so that's why I always bring iconography and understandings from different cultures into my understanding of what the tarot is offering us and what it helps us to tune into. And because I read so regularly, I think it's opened me up to a lot of other gifts. So now I can channel a little bit, and I can be a medium, and I talk to trees, and
Mm-hmm.
I read the clouds. I read the clouds here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because I have that roof thing, and I lived in New York for so long, it was like there was no sky. And here it's like I have sky, sky, sky. And it's like, what is that saying? What is that saying? So, you know, it's like, if it's interesting to you on any level, whatever that is, try it. See what happens. Try it, you know?
Mhm.
And you'll discover it's like, well, it's not for me, which is fine, you know?
Mhm.
It's kind of like a little kid that, like, I don't eat string beans. You ever taste them? No. I hate them.
Mhm.
And then, you know, a year later or 2 years later, it's like, oh, string beans are my favorite vegetable.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit like that. It's really like, you know, you have an inkling, something flies by or something, or the same. So this is what happens a lot. The
Mhm.
same image or the same idea or the same conversation or the same hearing comes up 2 or 3 times. It's like, that's the universe saying to you, you ought to try this. You might like
Mhm.
this, you know? So I think it's about, you know, opening to the messages and then
Mhm.
doing something with them and then
Right.
do something with them. It's, you know, it's really nice to get a message, um, but unless you're going to utilize it, you know, it's great if you go and buy food, but then you have to cook it, right?
Right. Well, I can tell you an instant in my life that matches with that. Um, Before the world lockdown, I was reading a Brian Weiss book again, and it was Many Lives, Many Masters.
I remember that one.
And I was trying to read up on that because I was doing a lot more past life readings, and I wanted to kind of get, his whole take on that. And I mentioned that book to a friend of mine, and she looked him up and she said, "Oh, he's going to be in Texas in a couple weeks." I said, "Really?" And she looked it all up. She sent me all the information and said, "You've been talking about this guy for about 20 years. You really ought to go see him." So I looked it up. It wasn't that expensive. And my oldest son lived in Austin at the time. So I could drive down there and stay with them. And I went to it was a one day seminar, hotel in Austin. And that's when I met my guide, Addie, because I knew I had a guide, but I was like, I really used to work psychic fairs in the time when everybody's guide was an Indian chief or a pharaoh or, a bunch of stuff that I really couldn't relate to. And I figured, well, I guess there's something else that's attached to me, but I'm not going to worry about it. And so the second time, um, this he uh, hypnotized. It's a ballroom with 800 people in it. He hypnotized us the first time to go back to a past life. And I did go back briefly into a past life once I saw something that was very meaningful to situations I kept doing to myself in this life. And then he said, "Okay, now we're going to go." And he started talking about guides. And I thought, well, I'm just going to get to be very relaxed in my chair here in the ballroom. And the next thing I knew, I was standing next to this tall African woman and I knew I was in a southern plantation kitchen
Mhm.
in the Carolinas. And I don't know how I knew I was in the Carolinas.
Mhm.
And I looked at her and she was very tall and she was very dark. And she was dressed in the aprons and all that stuff. And I said, "Hi, I'm Nancy." And she said, "Yes, I know." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I don't know your name." And she said, "It's Addie." And I said, "Are you my guide?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Should I apologize now for never having gone to look for you or whatever?" And she said, "No, no, no, dear. You were just fine. You did everything I needed you to do." So I was like, okay. Apparently, I didn't need to be that aware of her. Anyway, we talked for a little bit. I found out where she had come from and how she ended up in an earthly form. I was seeing her in her last human incarnation. And then I said, "Why am I here?" And she took me across the kitchen to this big cabinet that was in the corner of the kitchen. And she said, "Open the door." And I opened the door and it was a mess. It was like someone had taken everything and just stuffed it in, sort of like Fibber McGee's closet, if you're old enough to remember Fibber McGee and Molly on the radio. And I said, "Oh my God." And I said, this is a mess. This needs to be straightened up. And she said, that's what you're here for. You walk people across and show them, help them open that closet door, and you help guide them so they can straighten it out.
Mm.
And I'd never thought about what I did, but most of the readings actually kind of fit in that thing. And the next thing I knew, I was back awake and I was in the ballroom with the other 800 people. And I now had met Addie. And since then, she and I have had a very active communication. And she said, no, you didn't need me before you were that age and you were growing into the powers you have. And through Addie, I met Frank, who is my other guide that's always been with me. But things like that happen to you. So open your heart up. And if it's like my friend sending me the thing saying, you need to go to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a big believer in spending lots of money, but I do believe sometimes we need to make investments to be able to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm prejudiced because Tarot's where I started. It's what I like to do. That's why I teach it with Jeffrey. And I think I take a very Jungian, Carl Jung, I take a very Jungian view of the Tarot. It's archetypes, it's images, it's things we can work with. And that's what we talk about in the class, but not, we talk about it, but we don't beat people over the head with it. We just say, this is how it works. And to me, everybody in the world buys a Tarot deck and then they look at it and go, what the hell am I going to do with this? And the only way you can learn how to read Tarot is to read Tarot.
That's right.
And whether it's if you take a formal class, it can really help you organize it so that you can digest it.
Yeah. We all have those 1 or 2 or 3 cards that it's like, it's like all you see in your mind is like an upside down question mark. Like, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we can help you navigate that. And the thing about it is really about learning to trust your own voice, learning to trust your own intuition. That's why I don't think either one of us are very rigid. Like, what this card means all the time. It doesn't really work like that.
No, and the cards mean what they mean when they're next to each other.
Right, exactly. And it's a guide for possible energies. It's like it's almost like you're eating something and it's like, oh, I can tell that it has a little bit of cinnamon in it or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like that. And it's really about, empowering you, the individual, to make your own interpretation, to really understand it, what it means to you, and then you can actually, bring it forth.
Right. It's a butterfly. Somebody want to know what was on my shirt?
Butterflies. So butterflies here in Mexico are a symbol of, spirits.
Yes.
Like your ancestors coming to visit.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not dissing, like, you can use a pendulum. I used pendulums when I was growing up, but I really didn't understand how that energy works. And I do believe if you're going to work with a pendulum, you need to really understand, to ask for guidance, to ask for clarity, and to make sure you're protected every time.
Yeah.
Which you should do whether you're reading a card, throwing an oracle card, all that.
Well, we both do prayers of protection every day. I mean, every day I call on the violet fire. And to violet fire transmutation to protect and guide and
Archangel Zadkiel and Ascended Master Saint Germain and
Steve.
And those are all ways to learn how to protect yourself. Do you guys have any questions? I had sort of anticipated somehow we'd have questions, but what I got today from people who thought, I don't know if you saw about how my statement about not having my ducks in a row, and this lady said, those darn ducks, they don't get in a row. And somebody's really interested in us talking.
In the park this week.
right. And Tiny Dancer thought it looked like it was going to be a great program. Another person thought it was going to be a great program. Margaret, Margaret put her thing in the comments under the YouTube posting, but she put lots of those little graphic hearts, but those don't translate. They don't come over. And this one, Pixie Dust, put lots of smiley faces. So
Love the name Pixie Dust.
yes, and I don't know what else to say. Jeffrey, do you want to talk about the other things you're working on, and then I'll go through?
Yeah, so okay, so aside from doing tarot readings, I'm also a healer. I work with an energy called IET, which is integrated energy therapy, which actually can help you to move through trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It releases the trauma from your body that we're holding, and we all have trauma on some level. So let's say in the throat, most people hold shame in the throat. So we pull out the shame and we imprint support with the help of your guides and angels and my guides and angels, your elemental, my elemental. That's the other kind of work that I do. And I'm very involved in meditation, have been for a really long time. And it really, for me, it's like essential. It's like breakfast. And it's more essential than breakfast, actually, because sometimes I don't need breakfast. And I also have a course that I put together that's, if you go to my YouTube channel, it's pretty much on every video, where I developed 7 different meditations, all for the chakras, and then 7 different little art exercises, really simple. You're working with yellow, which is solar plexus. So this is about releasing fear and bringing in expansion, bringing in joy, just for an example. So I put that together as a series, and I have it up on Thinkific, which is one of those platforms that hosts those kind of things, as a like a class, like a little mini class, a little series that you could use again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really, in all humility, I'm really good at guiding meditations. I'm really good at it.
He has some beautiful guided meditations. They are really, really excellent.
I'm really good at it. And there are clients that I have that I do it with weekly. So we talk about what's going on and what they'd like to bring in and what they want to release. And then I kind of have a general idea about it, and then I just sort of go.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what happens when you tune in and when you open up to your own spirit and to your own power and to your own guidance and your own connection, that we all have this ability to, utilize, not only utilize, tune in to, I guess is the word, our own spirit, our own gifts. And we all have, your gift might be baking the best pie in the world. I mean, that's a real gift.
Mm-hmm.
Move in next to me. I like cherry, I like peach, and
lots of good fruit in Mexico.
Oh God, a good peach pie is like a slice of heaven. So it's really about tuning into who we are in essence, right? And we all come in with certain gifts. Some people have music. Some people are really good at math. Some people are really good at being accountants. And that's a gift. They're all gifts. And the more I can tune into it, the more I could utilize it, the more I can help myself, the more I can help others. And I think that's the journey that we're all on. I think that's really the journey that we're all on. It looks different for different people, which I think makes sense. I think it makes sense. Because that way we build a community. If everyone was good at the same thing, it'd be a little dull.
Well, okay, I've got 2 comments. One is Linda Fraser wants to know, how do we start working together? And I remember I was tuning into, this is back when nobody left their house and everybody was living through YouTube. I was watching Sheila on Celtic Tarot, and she had Jeffrey on. And I just thought he was delightful, and I enjoyed listening to him. And I got your information from Sheila.
Right.
And then I got in touch with Jeffrey, and then Jeffrey and I traded. This is when he was still in New York City.
Yes.
Before.
How long ago was that, Nancy?
we knew each other about 6 months before you flamed out, before your
So, six
and
and a half
he
years.
made me this wonderful scarf, which I keep in my office. And I'm not big on scarves because, I mean, I wear them occasionally if I want to do something sort of really stunning and different. But um, I realized in a past life experience I was hung. So anything too tight around my throat, I take exception to it. It took me a long time to be able to wear necklaces because of that.
A lot of women have things with the throat. A lot. It's very
I know.
common. Very. Yeah.
So, but that's how we met Linda, and then we just kept touch. And then when he moved to Mexico, I helped get some material down to him, like a computer that he
Which is
could.
I'm on right now.
Mm-hmm. And this is another, and this is not an uncommon story, Lori. Do I need to open my heart? When I was little, I would see children I knew dead days before that they had died. I asked for those visions to go away. Not an unreasonable request, may I say? I'd feel the same way. Um, the little girl in me still does not trust in that ability. I'm going to tell you right now, Lori, one of the things I learned from some really good psychics when I was coming up is um, you don't, if you run into something you don't like to do, it's like me and remote viewing. I think remote viewing is very intrusive. It's one of the reasons why I don't like to do politics, because I think it's really intrusive to go into people's lives and look at some of that stuff. And it's not that it's not going to inform me or the people who are watching my show, but I just don't think it's fair. So if you don't want to do remote viewing, you can open your heart up. You can start to use other skills. And if you feel like you're sliding off in that direction, you can stop it. And I have a lot of sympathy for what you're saying, because one of the reasons my mother was so dead against me being a psychic was that was her one skill. And my mother was a degreed RN. You can imagine how much fun that was to work in a hospital pre-World War II with that skill. And um, she never really talked to me much about it, but what she'd use it for was my friend that I left in the movie theater to be scared to death. Her mother died between our junior and senior year of high school. And I did not know until I was in my 50s that my mother had taken that friend aside and said, "You need to go make some dinner dates with your mom. You know, there's 4 kids, and we were all boomer families. They only had 4 kids in their family. We had 5. We had families on my block that had 11 kids in their family. Anyway, my mom said, you need to go talk to Doris and find out what she's been through and what her life was like." And she said, "You just might really want to know." So my friend thought it was weird, but then it seemed right. So she went and made some dinner dates with her mom, because her mom was an airline pilot who flew small craft. She wasn't part of an organized airline. And
That's wild.
yeah. And so my friend and her mom went out, and I know that I remember in that spring that she told me that she'd been out having dinner with Doris. And then that summer, her mother died in a plane crash. Her mother was flying the plane. And when we were in our 50s, we met in Chicago just to have an old girlfriend's retreat. And she told me if my mother had not told her to go and speak with her mother, she found out that when her mother died, that she's the only one who knew what her mother majored in college. All these things about that her mother told her about growing up. She was the only one of the 4 kids who had any idea who Doris was. So, and I asked my mom later about that, and she said, "Yeah, I saw 6 months before she was going to die that she was going to die, and it just seemed so sad that they weren't closer." And my mom said, "But I just still don't want to talk about it." And by this time, I was a fully active psychic out in the world doing that, and my mother still wouldn't talk about it. But she could see it till, I presume, the day she died. I don't know. It was just not a place she wanted to go. And I don't pry around at people.
And you know what, Lori? Also, it's like, okay, so you have gifts, but you can also say to your higher self, to your spirit guides, it's like, listen, I'm willing to utilize my gifts, but
Uh-huh.
this I'm not open for.
I'm
This I'm not open for. It's like the human self-will is so powerful, that, like I can choose whatever it is that I receive and whatever it is I don't want to receive. So, you put that up and put that out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing, but like I need a sieve. I need
Right.
a boundary. I need a funnel. I need a compartment. And
Mm-hmm.
that's fine.
So you're not walking through the grocery store seeing it.
Exactly. 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 Because or when I know I'm going through a transition, sometimes I'll talk to them. I'm like, can we slow down a little bit here?
Mm-hmm.
Slow down. I'm like, this is a little much.
Mm-hmm.
We slow down.
And I know I talk, there's a lot of mediums I know that are mediums but they won't channel. They won't trans channel. They won't let the entity come through them. They
Mhm.
just have that sense of space, and you can do that.
Right.
Because I can see and hear things and know what's going to happen,
Right.
but you're not going to see, Addie's not going to take over my body. Frank's
Right.
not going to take over my body.
Right. I'm not open to that either. And some people are, and that's fine. But that's not my shtick. Yeah.
Yeah. And Debbie Joyce is backing us up. I understand. I didn't appreciate hearing who would die next. Now I understand. She's figured out a way to live with it and work with it. Okay, Melody has a question. Can you suggest this is going to be to you, Jeffrey, because I don't do telekinesis.
I would ask. I would
Mm-hmm.
ask. I would ask. It's like, okay, I humbly, in all humility, I ask, and then maybe set aside a time and do whatever, you need to do. Wear a certain color or sit in a certain place in the house or whatever it is, like between 10 and 11, just make something. And it's like, I'm open,
Mm-hmm.
I'm open and I'm going to sit and I'm going to listen. And, it's not a movie. It's not going to happen in 10 minutes. Maybe it will. But I think it's about carving out the space. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Carving out the space and say, I'm open to receive. Thank you. Right. But I also, so I do some Akashic Records work and I do other stuff like that. But like, I can't go into the Akash if I'm in my head. I have to be in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm really upset or I'm really anxious or I'm really nervous and it's like, it's just not going to work. So I need to wait till I get calm and then I go at a certain place. That's why I go see the trees.
Mm-hmm.
I sit in a certain place in my apartment and I'm open to it. And lately I've been going to see the trees. And this week I went and I found, there's so many trees. I never go to the same place. It's always different trees. And I said, okay, that's the place. And I lay down and I completely fell asleep. Like I just got knocked out, like boom, like for 10 minutes. And I think the message was, you're safe here.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a cradle. It was like being a baby in a cradle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incredible because there are so many people living here. The park is very big, but I can be in that park during the week, during the day. I'm the only one there. It's really wild.
Mm-hmm.
Such a big city. And you would think, I know like people work, but there's people off on Wednesday and Tuesday or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not going to walk around this beautiful park? And it's like, it's fine with me. But I think part of it was like I made the space, right,
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And then I allowed myself to be kind of nurtured.
Mm-hmm.
It was only a 10-minute, I think. I didn't look at my watch.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a 10-minute nap for all I know. It's Rip Van Winkle and
Mm-hmm.
and we're now in 2030. I mean, are we?
Yeah.
So
No, don't do that, Jeffrey. I'd miss you. I wonder where you went.
it's setting the intent and opening and saying, okay. And, you can ask for it, come slowly and, what do we call it? Softly.
Right.
Softly.
And Melody, the other thing I'd suggest you could do is go into YouTube and put in your search engine telekinesis. You'll find everybody who's ever written a book, or if you can find a book. I don't know if you're a reader or not. I used to be a big reader, but I found as I get older, I get more impatient with books. But there's a lot of people like Next Level Soul Guy has a lot of people,
Yeah,
CEO,
yeah,
see
yeah,
the
yeah.
guy who runs CEO. They do good long-term interviews, and you might hear what kind of how they got to where they were, and they'll often talk about societies or groups they belong to that talk about that. Telekinesis is something I know nothing about. So, and Debbie Joyce, I was stoned to death, but I still like stones, only the colorful ones. I'm glad you like them since she's throwing rocks in the garden at this point. Be a little tough. Um, yeah.
This is
Yeah.
coming up for a lot of us. This is the
Mhm.
kind of stuff that's coming up for a lot of us, whether we
Mhm.
know it or not. A lot of us are going into our past lives, and we've all been through war and famine and et cetera, because we're human. Because
Mhm.
and it could have happened in Mesopotamia, it could have happened in the Congo, it could have happened in China, it could have happened anywhere. And we all, I feel like as a collective, we're all shedding these
Mhm.
skins of the trauma that we collectively hold or have held. And
Mhm.
something new, something big is happening. And a lot of people are like, oh,
No, I know that in my last life before this one, I died in a bomb shelter in England. And as a child, I could never in the 50s, I could never figure out why sirens used to just make me batshit crazy. But I realized once I became aware of what happened to her that I died with the air raid sirens glaring over my head.
the
And it's
blitz.
one of the reasons why I hate, hate news stories where you see people running in bombs. There's a lot of news I can't watch now, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not because I don't want to care about what's happening to those people, but I can't take care of myself and watch that stuff. So, okay. Oh, Debbie Joyce again. I tried remote viewing over 50 years ago. Never again. It was finding a missing child near me. I felt myself becoming buried, and that ended that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I used to be head of crime watch for Dallas, and some of the cops knew I was psychic, and they had a mother who disappeared with a child, and they were trying to find her, and they talked me into doing a reading on it, and I would never do that again. I ended up seeing where she was walking, and I was in her head, and she was keeping herself calm, but they were being dragged off into this mesquite woods, and that's where they found her body and her son. They'd been shot right at Christmas, and her son was the age my kids were at the time. It was not. It was nothing I was prepared emotionally to go in and do. So.
Yeah, I'm very boundaried with that stuff. I'm very, I think because the childhood that I had put up a lot of boundaries to protect my.
Hmm.
So, like, I get it, but it's very, I have like these natural boundaries, and I'm really,
Hmm.
because I don't walk around picking that stuff up all the time. I have to make a decision to tune in, and
Hmm.
usually it's to help somebody. It's not really, it's really to like, the end result is to be of service, basically. The end
Right.
result is to be of service. So for me, it's not, I'm very reverent,
Hmm.
very reverent.
Right. And Tammy's right. Going into nature is that's when you're closest to heaven as you will ever be on earth. So
True.
that's where you go in your park.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much here, Um,
Hmm.
in fact, the friend that I had over last night, he's quite the interesting character. So last week when we met at the meetup, he was telling me there are forests inside the city is so big. So there are forests and little mini forests within the city, and they all have their own little flavor. So I have to dive deeper into it
Hmm.
because I know that.
Mexico City is fascinating because it was on where actually Mexico City is now. It was a big lake,
Yeah,
and everybody lived in islands on the lake,
yeah,
and then they eventually filled it in, and so they all kind of have these mini ecosystems that had built up over time.
Yeah, and then parts of the city. So there's another pyramid down in the south of the city called Huicuilco,
Mm-hmm.
which predates Teotihuacan. So we're talking about 3,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And those people, there was a volcano that the lava moved very, very slowly, so they were able to like leave.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones who formed Teotihuacan, which is like Teotihuacan is basically the ancient Rome of Mesoamerica.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've gone down there, and that's called Pedregal, and it's old lava fields, and everything grows there. It's amazing, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
city, but it's solid ground. There's no point because the city just took on a weird shape. So part of it is a lake, and part of it's solid ground, and yeah, it's the wildest place I've ever been. I mean, the day I got here, it was like, you belong here.
Yeah.
Past life.
People
101.
feel that way about spots.
Yeah.
Linda loved your phrase. I love the end result is to be of service. And that's true. It's what I
Yeah.
think all of us kind of feel that are in this. And cartomancies had the good fortune to find people alive with remote viewing. That's good.
Hmm.
That makes it easier. But and I think I wish it was something. I mean, I really admire mediums and psychics who do that kind of work. It's just not what I do. But what I do is I'm getting ready to do 9 candles again. And so this time the 9 candles are going to end on the 19th of June because we're going up to the summer solstice. And it's, and this whole passage, this time is an enormous time when we're clearing a lot of stuff out. The eclipse had a lot to do with clearing things out and getting us in touch with our higher selves. And what it's like what it says in Now, it's like becoming. I read the poem Becoming a couple weeks ago, and the gist of it is this person prays to God to be put back together. And God says, well, you're not a puzzle. Why do you need to be put back together? And the person said, well, I keep falling apart. And God says, you're not falling apart, you're becoming. You're casting off the things you don't need anymore. So the whole 9 candles each day, I'm going to have a different word that relates to becoming. I'm going to have a psychic come, and we're going to talk about what it means for us to become and walk up to that day when we go into the summer solstice and welcome the sun in our part of the world on the longest day of the year, and how to bring that sunlight into our lives.
Mm-hmm. I work with the sun a lot.
You have no choice. You live in Mexico.
I know. No, I just have a choice. I mean, the Mexicans walk around with umbrellas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a sombría is like a shade umbrella.
Yeah.
Right. Sombra is shade. So yeah, but I really communicate with the sun every day, and I ask for the blessings every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Change.
right. That's moving towards the light. And we're all moving towards the light and becoming lighter ourselves by doing so. And what I'm completely reworking my website. So if you go look at the front page, it's changed. And it's through my website that you can sign up for my readings. I had Jeffrey's email up there. You can contact Jeffrey personally if you want a reading from Jeffrey and learn about his way of seeing the world. Jeffrey and I, every week, we post the weekly wanderings, and they're kind of fun.
Yeah.
And they're getting better, man. June is kick-ass.
Yeah, a few months ago we had like a month. I don't remember what.
March was like, oh my God.
Oh, but it was toward the end of last year. I don't remember what month it was. October, November, December, one of those. And it was like, oh my God, are we ever going to move? Are we ever, it's like it was almost like the further you went into the swamp, like the deeper you got. It was like, geez.
Right. It was like you felt like you were walking through psychic sludge.
Yeah.
It was really, and we're like, And then we have to read it in a way that makes people not want to slash their wrists, right?
Yeah.
And
I think we both read like that, because for me, like people are calling you for a reading for clarity and for hope, right? Like if I see something, I'm not going to not say it, but it's really like, well, how do I navigate this? How can I keep my head above water? How can I see the light?
mm-hmm,
I mean, that's the point,
mm-hmm.
because it's like we all have all that negative in our own head. It's like all I need to do is like call someone to say, oh yeah, it's not going to work out. Oh, don't even try. Stay in bed. Like.
And trust me, I had a couple months this spring. I had some months this spring when right around the eclipse, and and I just really, it just kept getting worse and worse. And one Sunday I had a terrible headache, and I could not move my neck. It wouldn't. I mean, if I did that much, it was like screaming. Everything was so tense. And someone called me that you'll see later on. She's a healer, and she said, because we were supposed to do a show that week, and I'd written her, and I said, I can't do this. And so she called me to see what was wrong. And she went to her altar and looked at what was going on. And she said, when you're watching the eclipse, some part of the matrix that surrounds you, that protects you, broke.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had 3D energy just pouring in this little hole. And it's been going on for 2 weeks. And trust me, if that's 3D energy, I want no part of it anymore. She managed to clean it out, and she helped with the help of one of her healers, and then calling on Addie. They healed my matrix. So I'm going to tell you right now, sometimes, I mean, I was sleeping 12 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
I was really not in great shape. And I realize now, as soon as this last new moon kind of did it, I did my whole thing. I wrote my intentions. I drank the glass of water that I spoke the intentions to, and I burned them. And I did burn them, and that took a lot because burning has never worked out too well for me. And but it was a lovely new moon thing, and I really feel like I'm moving forward.
Yeah, this new moon really felt like almost like waking up from a nap, but refreshed in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bless my water too, because I can't drink from the tap here. So I get water. I mean, I deliver it. So I have it in a big thing and
Mm-hmm.
bless it. And I bless it. So every time I drink it, it's part of the blessing.
And I really feel like the last half of this year, the last 6 months, it's going to be wonderful. And that's why I decided to go ahead and offer my 6-month readings. I was thinking about not doing it, especially when I was so tired all the time. But I think there's so much hope coming towards us. So much, not just hope, but real inspiration and time to move.
Yeah. And light is information. It's a
Mm-hmm.
simple light is information.
So Jen did her intentions with the new moons. Can't wait to see what happens. I can't either. And and Tammy's right. We're letting go of what we can't carry forward as we advance our energies, and that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And Lori did the whole thing. She burned Palo Santo, uh, drank the water, and she's waiting to see what the universe is going to share back for her. All you don't even need. You just need to let it go, and just it'll show up. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big believer in everyone making their own ritual. You have suggestions, but some people get so like, oh, it has to be Wednesday and you have to have cinnamon. And it's like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Close your eyes and just, tune in. I don't want this anymore, and this is what I want.
That's right. Right. And it's funny because there's a guy who's an artist and he does a show called Attract Passion. And his name is Gaspar. And he's an artist in Slovenia. And I watch him periodically over the last 3 or 4 years. And I was sitting Monday morning, I got to go testify at a friend's divorce case. That's always so much fun, especially when you've had a particularly miserable, drawn-out divorce of your own. And I had to go back to the same courthouse where all that happened. And I'd almost kind of forgotten, but and then when I got to the courthouse, I couldn't find parking. When I found parking, it was in the adjunct garage. It was 5,000 steps to walk from my car up to the courtroom. And I don't walk 5,000 steps in a day usually, but I did it. And I was sitting there listening to him through my headset because I was just trying to not be in that hallway. And he said, he was talking about how we're breaking through and breaking away. And he said, some of you who are listening to this are going to be sitting somewhere and listening to this, and it's going to be in a place where you were never comfortable before. But now you've grown enough, you've become enough of who you are that you're comfortable there. And I realized it's just like he was following my life right at that moment, because that's exactly how I felt in that hallway. So I can tell you guys, is just keep going, keep trying different stuff. The worst that's going to happen is it's not going to make you happy. It's like, I can't do telekinesis, so I don't do telekinesis. But
right. And or if it does work, or something like an inkling that so if I try this and I like it, it can lead to more things. It could lead to, you never know. It's almost like the moon card, That's how I see the moon card. It's like this weird winding path, and it's not 100% clear, but I know I'm on the right path.
Right. It's tiny and it's dark, but it's a path, and it's better than having nothing at all.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Sit
and there are some cards that are nothing at all. They're like
or weight, or
they're weight. I mean, they're just kind of a weight card.
Yeah.
And so Sharon Sipes back in the house.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon. So listen to yourselves, and if you see something you really want to do and you hear a great big screaming no, strip away the situation and listen to whose voice is telling you no. Because sometimes it's the person who doesn't want you to succeed.
Or sometimes it's your ego, living in fear, right? Oh, you can't do that, but then, maybe on the inside, the small voice says, try it, see what happens.
Right.
It's usually the small voice that's the right one. Not so much the head, and that's a journey in itself. That's a journey in and of itself.
Well,
hard.
When we develop inside of our mothers, our heart develops first. It's the very first organ that develops, and it has the most time. And it actually sends more messages to the brain than the brains can effectively send to it. So,
the heart is the queen, and the head is the general. To be in charge, because otherwise you have a coup.
So, anyway, if you're interested in one more path into the light, you can consider our tarot class. I'm doing readings now. I'm doing 6 months and regular ones. I'm doing garden readings, and for my happy gardeners that I saw some of them in the chat, we will be having a class this Saturday. And I thank Jeffrey for showing up and coming with me today. And I'm going to be talking a lot more about becoming. I think I'm doing a show with Terry from Holding Your Space, and we're going to be talking about becoming and the changes that are happening around us. So thank you to each and every one of you that showed up, and have a blessed day.
Blessings. Thank you.